Hi, I'm David Edmonds of the BBC World Service, and this is The Big Idea. I found the most interesting ideas around and the people who thought them up, and I'm going to do my best to explain them. What's the chance that Donald Trump won't complete his first term of office? Fancy putting a number on it? A probability? Do you think you're a good judge of political events? Today's big idea: why we should be wary of political forecasters, especially the famous ones.
We dig in now to the numbers in the race for the White House, with most national and battleground state polls showing Hillary Clinton ahead.
Voting news, the result was shocking. Voters in Colombia have rejected a referendum that would have solidified a peace agreement between the Colombian government and armed FARC rebels.
You really think this is going to happen? Is Britain actually going to exit the EU?
If you want to make a bet right now, there is a 16% chance on betting market that it actually happens. So it's looking not very likely.
The election of Donald Trump, the vote on a Colombian peace deal, Brexit. All events which confounded the experts. The expert on experts, Philip Tetlock, is unsurprised by the experts' lack of expertise. He's had decades watching intently from the stands while others kick around their crystal balls.
We've been looking for ways of assessing whether experts, political experts, are well calibrated within their claimed domains of expertise, whether it's the Soviet Union or American politics or the European Union or China. So you've asked people lots of questions over time within their areas of expertise, outside their areas of expertise as well, and you observe how often events occur. When they say those events are 10% likely or 30% likely or 70% likely, and so forth.
Professor Tetlock runs tournaments in which contestants, both professionals and amateurs, are asked to predict a range of events. It turns out that the people who make their living thinking and talking about politics and economics, scholars, policy wonks, pundits, are not good at forecasting what will happen in their area of expertise.
Experts don't know as much as they think they know. They were systematically overconfident. Now, not all experts were as overconfident as others. Some experts were fairly well calibrated. These more modest experts tended to be more diffident about what they knew. They did more cautious, they more on the one hand, on the other hand kind of talk. So we found an inverse relationship between how accurate experts were and how much the media sought them out.
I love that finding. So the more famous they are, the less reliable they are.
It's not a perfect correlation, but it is a significant correlation. The media like people who have a simple narrative. They also like people who predict things that are dramatic. Dramatic change is catchy. If I predict that there's going to be a nuclear war in the Korean Peninsula in the next year, that's going to get a lot more attention than if I predict there's going to be a continued standoff.
Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States. Take it to the bank. Okay. I guarantee it.
All right. Donald Trump will never, ever be president of the United States.
This race is over. As far as Donald Trump's concerned, it will never, ever, ever happen.
So on the whole, the more certain the expert, the more famous the expert, the more useless their predictions. Some experts in Tetlock's tournaments were so bad that their predictions were no more accurate than chance. A monkey throwing a dart would have been as useful. Some experts are better than others, however. One way of distinguishing between them is to ask which of two animals they most resemble. This one. For those not an expert in all things vulpine, that's a fox. Or this one. The scampering sound of a spiny mammal, the hedgehog. The 20th century British philosopher Isaiah Berlin drew a distinction between hedgehog-type experts and fox-type experts. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. For example, the hedgehog might have one grand theory. The fox would scavenge for information and insight from many sources and disciplines.
I think a foxy economist would be someone who takes into account culture, or a foxy psychologist would be someone who takes into account economics, and so forth. I think multidisciplinarity is an important quality of foxiness.
As it turns out, foxes perform better than hedgehogs. The best predictors are open to ideas from various sources, open to changing their mind, modest about their calculations. They're willing to acknowledge past errors. What's more, they're not even necessarily professionals. Take Elaine, a brilliant performer in forecasting tournaments.
Well, one character, I don't know if I should use the full name, but we'll just say Elaine, was a pharmacist, and she's just a remarkably thoughtful and balanced human being who does her best to see both sides of things and balance the evidence.
Could Elaine become a multimillionaire by going to a bookie and betting on some of these outcomes?
It's hard to beat the betting markets. The betting markets are a kind of forecasting tournament in and of themselves, and they reflect the wisdom of the crowd, and it's a hard benchmark to beat. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility she could make some money in the betting markets because she's quite a bit better than most people at putting probabilities on things. But as for becoming extremely rich very fast, I rather doubt it.
Elaine doesn't write for the New York Times or appear on Fox TV. This elderly pharmacist from suburban Maryland is just, it transpires, terrific at weighing up evidence and judging events. Elaine is very good at spotting fine-grained differences. The difference between a 60-40 and a 40-60 bet. In other words, between an event which is slightly more likely than not to occur and one which is slightly less likely than not to occur. Tetlock calls Elaine a super forecaster. Like other super forecasters, Elaine really cares about being right.
They value their forecasting accuracy record more than they value their loyalty to a political party. Part of the problem in political debates is people's primary loyalty is to their colleagues within their political unit. It's not to the abstract goal of accuracy. The weird thing about super forecasters is that they tend to care a lot more about their accuracy than they do about party loyalty.
Philip Tetlock continues to run forecasting competitions, setting questions about refugee flows or nuclear proliferation, or whether a climate change treaty will be signed. Forecasting matters. Any government would love to improve its predictions on who will win foreign elections, where war will break out, which countries will do well economically. If only, says Tetlock, governments would rely less on their senior advisors and rather more on forecasting tournament stars like Elaine. But that would mean undermining vested interests.
Take someone like me. I'm 64 years old. Imagine I were working in an intelligence agency and I were a senior analyst on China. And someone says, instead of the senior people always going to brief the policymakers, we're going to pick who the briefers should be on the basis of how well they do in forecasting tournaments. So 25-year-olds are now going to compete with 65-year-olds in these forecasting tournaments. So let's say if Tetlock was an expert on China and he used to do the briefings when Xi Jinping shows up into town, Tetlock will now have to prove that he can make forecasts as accurately and reliably as these younger people. How do you think the senior analysts are likely to react to that scenario? And the answer is we're going to want to kill forecasting tournaments pretty quickly, aren't we?
Philip Tetlock making a forecast of his own. Still, if he's right, politicians brave enough to use tournaments to identify good predictors would reap enormous rewards. But to return to my first question, what's the chance that Donald Trump will survive to the end of his first term of office? I don't know about you, but I'm feeling rather less confident about my judgment now. Perhaps I should ask Elaine. Thanks a lot for listening to The Big Idea from the BBC World Service with me, David Edmonds. The producer is Ben Cooper. If this episode was as good as you'd predicted, please leave a rating or comment if your podcast provider allows you to. You can even let me know on social media about the big ideas you think I should be looking at. In episode 3, could we pass down to our children more than our genes?